Danny Flexon for Seconds Out. Delighted to be joined by esteemed trainer Paddy Fitzpatrick. How you doing?
How you doing, brother?
I'm very good. We thought it'd be a good time to talk, as last month saw the release of your autobiography, Hats, Handwraps and Headaches, if I've got that right. It's a bit of a tongue twister, but obviously all relevant terms with your career. What led you to the notion to write and release an autobiography? Why did you think now was the right time?
I definitely didn't necessarily think it was the right time. I didn't all of a sudden think, hey, I got lots to say. Let me write a book here. It was Teach actually wrote the book. Teach trains in my gym. I've been knowing him 3-4 years, and he said to me there around 18 months, 2 years ago, he said, I'd like to write a boxing book, and I'd like to write it on you and your journey through boxing if I could. So I says, well, okay, what have I got to do? And he said, you just got to sit and chat with me. So that's all we did. He put on a tape recorder and we sat there and we drank some Guinness and chatted, and then he put a book together. I definitely didn't think that there was enough there to put a book together.
Well, having seen the synopsis, I think you're wrong, respectfully. I think there's plenty there. I think you probably could have filled 2 books. But yeah, Teachers, of course, Lee Simpson, your co-author, who's been instrumental from what you've just said in the process. I just want to take you through some of the kind of, I don't want to spoil the book for anyone, but take you through some of the main bits to whet people's appetite. And I guess the first thing is how you first got into boxing. And I believe there was a chance meeting with Freddie Roach in the Channel Islands, of all places. Is that right?
That's how I first got into training. I first got into boxing when I was a teenager back at home. I first got into the coaching then when I met Freddie by chance. I was living out in Jersey and Freddie was out there training Steve for, I think the first fight I met him with was the rematch with Nigel Benn. Right, that's when I first met Freddie. And then I met him again when Steve was getting ready for Frederick Sellier. And that's when he said to me, do you want to, come over and to Santa's Grotto?
So how did that come about? How did you meet him, first of all? And then how did it develop into an offer of working alongside him in the US?
Okay, so I met him by chance. I knew we had some friends that we both knew. So I met him that way. I met him in the gym when I was doing mitts with this dude that knew him. And he was just watching me doing mitts, and then we got chatting after that. What led him to offering me? No idea. He was probably just trying to help somebody out. Probably thought I needed a bit of help, and again, just throwing me a line. So who knows?
Did you have kind of roots and a family and stuff? Was it easy for you to kind of move your whole life out to the US?
Yeah, that was pretty easy for me. I pretty much just move around the whole time anyway. I left home at 15. I've been pretty much traveling ever since. It's a bit different now, married and with the kids and that, but yeah, pretty much. I'd change my mind in 24 hours. I could go to bed, wake up, and just decide to go to a different country and skip off and go somewhere.
How amazing must it have been to learn the intricacies of training from someone who was recognised, certainly then, maybe still now, as the #1 trainer in the world?
It was a blessing. It was a life changer. I just tried to keep my eyes and ears open and my mouth shut and just pay attention to what was going on. You don't even have to know what you're doing if you know you're around somebody that knows what they're doing. Just copy them until you start to understand it. And then bit by bit, you'll understand it a bit more. And you've been copying them since before you understood it. And then gradually it all starts to click into place.
And how long were you there with Freddie before you branched out on your own?
I was there a couple of years with Freddie. I came back. I went out there in the beginning of 97. I came back to work with Glenn Catley when he was getting ready for Neville Brown. And then Glenn got cut the last week in sparring. So then I moved back again to the States over to Freddie again. So I was with Freddie 2 years, on and off, mostly 2 years.
And was there a particular moment or something that happened that convinced you were ready to go alone after you spent all that time with Freddie? Or?
No, just life being life, brother. You just like I said, you just decide, you wake up and you decide, I'm going to move on now. I'm just, no huge reason, no bolt of lightning that hit me that decided I had to go. It was just time to move on.
I mean, before you started working with George Groves, and obviously for the first Froch fight, you came in at late notice. You weren't really in the attention span of most British boxing fans. Have you always made an effort to be low key, or is that just your nature? You don't seem to be someone who seeks out the spotlight.
I think I haven't. There's not much to shine a light on, is there? I mean, when you get, you're not known. I wasn't involved in any high profile fights over here at the time. When you are, then of course people just pay attention to kind of all the characters that's involved in that fight. But yeah, there's nothing to kind of shine a light on. So I enjoy being in the gym. I enjoy the psychology of it all. I enjoy that. So I'm quite content to leave me, when it's all happening, to leave me back in the gym with the sweeping brush. I'm quite content to spend my time there listening to some Bob Marley.
Did you always feel that you were well known, however, and well respected within the boxing community?
1 second, let me get. I'm going to keep talking to you, but I'm just going to try and get my charger. I don't know where it is. Well known. Listen, I spent 10 years in the States. I know the guys over there in the fight game. You're just the same way as when you're over here and you're in the gym, but what's well known. what's I suppose when you get called up to work with fighters, you know that you're doing whatever it is that they need. So 1 second. I don't know what's happened here.
Right.
I've lost you. So there you go. Is that gone again?
I'm sure it will come back any second. He says, hopefully.
But it's facing the wrong direction. Let me see. There you go.
Brilliant.
You don't think about being well known, do you? You just, next fight I'm working with. Who am I working with?
Just before we lost you, we were talking about real recognition within the boxing community. And I want to take you forward a bit now to when the wider public became more aware of you, and that's when you stepped in at short notice to helm George Groves' corner in his first fight against Carl Froch. And I guess the first place to start is, how did that come about? What do you remember of that time in terms of being in the gym and when it, I guess, went sour between Groves and Adam Booth, if that's the right way of putting it, and then you were drafted in?
I had worked with George for the De Gale fight a little bit, and I worked with him quite a bit for the Glencoff Johnston fight. We kept in touch now and again, nothing big. He'd just send a text, "Going to hope you're cool," and I'd say, "Yeah, same to you." And then one day he just called me and said, "Will you be home? Will you be at home tomorrow?" He sent a text, "Will you be at home tomorrow?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Can I come see you?" I said, "No problem." And then he just came see me and said, "I got 2 questions. Do you think I can beat Carl Froch? And if so, will you train me for him?" And that's kind of how it started.
Well, I guess if you'd have said no to the first question, there wouldn't have been much point in the second one, would there?
I suppose you're right, yeah.
Did he give you much insight into what had happened between himself and Adam? Because it seems like they still don't speak to this day.
No, he didn't, and it wasn't any of my business. If George had left Adam, I'd probably have asked questions, because it would be, well, why are you leaving an excellent trainer that got you, managed you, and trained you, and made you a world-class fighter? Why are you leaving him? So I think that question would have been warranted, but Adam decided to stop working with him, so there was nothing to ask. Trainers move around, or fighters move around all the time. It is what it is. That's boxing.
He was a significant underdog going against Froch the first time, and you came in on relatively short notice. It was a guy who'd been with another trainer for the vast majority of his career. Did the scale of the challenge excite you?
Did the scale challenge excite me? Well, it's for a world title, so that's what every fighter wants to be operating at. That's what every coach wants to be operating at. So the psychology behind it, the plotting and planning, because it's at the highest level. So of course it excites you that you're pitting your wits against proven class.
Do you think about that? Do you think about the guy in the opposite corner? So in this case, it would have been Rob McCracken, pitting your wits against another well-respected, intelligent trainer.
Not unless there was characteristics about the trainer that I knew, then that would come into play. If not, then you just expect every fighter to be completely prepared, and it's not enough to base a game plan on what are the weaknesses of your opponent. If your fighter doesn't have the attributes to take advantage of the opponent's weakness, it's not a weakness. It's only a weakness if your guy can take advantage of it. So I like that game of chess, and I like the psychological game of chess.
How much were you able to change, or did you feel needed to be changed ahead of that first Froch fight? Because Groves had his style that he'd worked on for a long time and already had the semblance of a game plan, I guess, from when they were preparing for Froch.
Yeah, 100%. Listen, I'm sure Adam and George would have spoken at length plenty of times about Carl, and Adam developed George into a truly world-class fighter with probably one of the best, most varied jabs in the pro game. I mean, he had not just an excellent jab of one style; he could throw it from pretty much anywhere, and all of that was developed through working with Adam. When, as far as changing him, you don't really have much time to change him.
Exactly, yeah.
You've got to be, okay, what do I already know is his best attributes? And how and when should we use those best attributes? You can't use them for 3 minutes and 12 rounds, or it's definitely a very hard thing to do if that's what you choose. So it's not about the attributes you have, but when are you going to choose to use them? How do you pace the rounds? Because you can't necessarily, I don't like the idea of pacing a fight, because you can let rounds get away from you, but you should be pacing rounds themselves. And anything that was a weakness, a weak area for us, if we can't prepare to be better in 9.5 weeks, which would have been a long shot, how can we at least negate Carl when he gets into a position to use that? So working inside would have been my main concern. George would always have better feet than Carl. George had a better jab. That's, like I said, Adam had developed a world-class varied jab into him, and so those things were there. You knew that George could out-jab him. You knew he was quicker hand speed, and you knew he had better feet. But we will end up inside, and what are we going to do then? You can't just trade with him when George never, up to that point, showed much that he would sit inside and trade. He was very, very much along the lines of David, who would stalk you on the outside and be picking up on every little nuance and mistake and kink, and then take advantage of it when you commit. But there was going to be periods of time where we had to sit inside with Carl, and you'd have no choice, because he would, he suffocates people. He just comes and comes, and you've either got to be on point non-stop or accept that at some stage you'll be inside. So the game plan inside was to tie up Carl's left hand under George's right, so he could just tie that up, keep his hand tidy, and then just keep his left hand free, just to nudge Carl and just steal little shots and sink the odd one in. Give the perception that he's working in there, but really what he's doing is just negating Carl in there. And that was it. You can't. I said to him, you're not going to win the inside work with Carl, but you can stop him winning it. So you can give the you're shutting down one arm straight away. You've got the other arm there that when he goes to open up that you can just nudge him. So that was the game inside. Outside, it was just about, being patient with the feet. Obviously, you can move so much. Carl will just take that ground for free. But he was already ready for the task under Adam. So there wasn't much to change, and it was just to make him aware of certain things.
How much of the psychological side, so Groves telling Carl what he was going to do in the first round and being very explicit about his game plan to kind of unsettle him, I guess, and there was a lot of mind games in the build-up. How much of that came from you, or how much of a part did you play in it?
I can claim that one. I can claim the revealing of the game plan. That was a shock to George when I came up with that one. He said, "Why are we going to do that?" And I said, "Well, because you're going to win the first round anyway. Anytime you fight him 100 times, you're going to win the first couple of rounds regardless. So why not state the obvious?" It was kind of like Hopkins. Hopkins was excellent at mind and mental warfare, and the different ways that he played Winky Wright as opposed to Trinidad. And when he then fought, who was it, Pavlik, when he said to Pavlik, "You're going to win the early rounds, and you're going to be too quick for me, and you're going to be this, you're going to be that, and then round 6, I'm going to touch you. And then you're going to know where I touched you, I can hit you. And then it's going to change." So at the end of round 6, when he just looks at Pavlik and goes, "Okay, well, he's bound to have touched him a few times already." Yeah. But that little okay, all of a sudden, you're not thinking about the 6 rounds, how well you box now. You're thinking, he told me I'd box at that, and he told me it's going to change now. Now, you're not automatically then going to box bad, but your mind is all of a sudden start to think, he told me the truth. He said this would happen. So then why wouldn't the mind at that given time under pressure start to believe the other things that you had told him? So it was about, you're going to win the early round anyway. Don't go inside. Instead of it giving the appearance that we're not wanting to engage, if it make it all about the jab, controlling the space with your feet, and then you're only going to land that one right hand, just going to land that one right hand. Well, that means you've only actually got to stop and commit one time in 3 minutes. So we're having plenty of time to be able to move, feel the pace that Carl's coming at, start to get the jab, the timing for the jab off, and he only has to stop and commit to one right hand. And if he does that, it's an easy thing to do, relatively easy in the first round with someone like Carl, but it means he's told the truth. So then when he says that, and he's so confident that he beats Carl in every other way, there has to be some semblance of, what's this dude on about? And that's been proven throughout the history of the game. So the fact that he dropped Carl, certainly didn't expect it to happen that early, did expect that it would present itself because Carl picks his right foot up when he shoots the right hand, so not down to chin, but down to balance. But it was one of those things where we possibly had that success maybe a little bit too early, because it put us into third gear when we should have still been in first.
I'm going to talk to you about the finish of the fight shortly, but before that, like you said, you only had 9.5 weeks. George boxed as well as anyone had ever seen him. Did you take, despite the result, did you take a certain amount of pride in that, the performance?
A certain amount of pride in the performance. Well, it was, of course, listen, if you have a watch on your hand, there'll be a tiny little spring in that you might not even see it if it's on the table on its own, but it's still important to the running of the watch.
Sure.
But I wasn't one of the bigger cogs in the wheel. Adam had developed him from a ferociously punching, spiteful amateur into a world-class, super middleweight, mandatory, with one of the best jabs out there. I had to remind him of certain things. keep him composed, because it wasn't just the pressures of his first world title, it was the pressures of the circumstance it was coming under. And, you know, make him, and hope that he agreed with me when I told him, you're not going to win the inside game, so we need to negate him. You know, he could have got prideful there at the wrong time and just thought, and we took a lot of shots to the body as it was in the first fight. You know, people think the first fight was the better performance. The second fight was the better performance, up until the point that, of course, we didn't get the chance to continue. Obviously, Carl did what good champions do, but that was a better performance. Because the first fight, George took a lot of punishment. He took a lot of punishment to the body. He fought excellently, but, you know, when everyone expects him to be going home after 2-3 rounds, and, you know, and that was it. That's what people were expecting to happen. And it doesn't happen. And it happens at a pace like it does. You can overthink that the performance was perfect on George's side. You know, it wasn't. We took a lot of shots to the body that we couldn't afford to start doing that again and getting into too higher gear too soon. And I thought the second time he was boxing a lot smoother and probably got, you know, a little bit complacent, and that's this level. I mean, Carl did it with 15 seconds left against Jermaine Taylor. That's the mentality of the man. That's what we admire about him.
Do you, in some of your quieter moments, ever think about the stoppage in that first fight? I think for most people now, there's a consensus that it was premature.
The reason that got me so much is because at the day before at the rules meeting, I had made a big deal about it. There was myself and George's attorney, Neil Sibley, in there. And of course, everyone else in there at the rules meeting. And then I said, listen, when it comes to tomorrow night, a lot has been made out the last 9.5 weeks about George's cast iron chin, or Carl's cast iron chin and George's glass chin. Yeah. I said, yes, Carl's got a cast iron chin and he's got a career that backs him to prove it. But nowhere in George's career does it show him to have a glass chin. He's undefeated. He's been on the canvas once and he got up and stopped that man. This isn't a fight to get into a big fight. This is the big fight. This is the world title. He is mandatory. So I just want to please be reassured that that isn't going to play a part in it. That's been in the news nonstop for 9.5, every page, every paper, so, and they were, listen, Paddy, you don't need to tell us. We got this. We know what we're up to. And I said, I know. I'm just respectfully saying, be aware. George should be on an even keel going into this fight with Carl. He should be treated the same. There shouldn't be any of that involved in it. We got it. So then when that happened, in the instant, to me, it was like, that's what I had said. Why? Yes, he was hurt. George was hurt. Of course he was hurt, but Carl was hurt plenty of times.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it was what it was. I didn't think there was anything untoward in the stoppage. I think it was a quick knee-jerk reaction that kind of couldn't be undone, as has happened, you know, the same as any movement that happened too quick. It couldn't be undone once it was done. And I think it was because almost it was expected to happen, you know, and that's what it came down to in the appeal, the fact that, you know, there was a couple of things, but one of them was that it was agreed with on the night before on a social media thing that the Carl would win in the 9th. So there was, in my opinion, zero underhanded. But you can't. Why do we buy into advertising for washing powder and what car you're going to buy next week? And it's just subconsciously being drip feeded into you that when you walk down, you've been told to go get some washing powder. Your head is used to seeing Persil, and you go over and pick up Persil. You don't stand there as a dude and think, wonder is Persil better for my clothes than Dad?
Yeah.
You pick it up, but it's being drip fed in there non-stop. And for 9.5 weeks, a fight that Howard was going to be reffing is in the paper constantly about this is what's going to happen. I think that you can't help it when in a brutal fight, the bell goes round 9, you think, whoop, and you get probably even more alerted than you were. And then, like he did get hurt at that point, but I do think he should have been allowed the opportunity to go on. But in the end, the race is now being run, and George finished and became a world champion. So you can say people did it the wrong way. You can say everything, but when a man finishes the race and got what he wanted out of the race, well, then everything that happened during that time, can't say it was wrong.
Everything for a reason, as George might say.
Everything for a reason, brother. There you go.
The second fight, as you said, didn't quite go your way. More nip and tuck, more technical than the first one, decided by one world-class shot. But do you kind of, is it still a nice memory for you in a way, not the finish, but being involved in an event of that magnitude? Because back then there was no AJ selling out arenas on a regular stadia on a regular basis. It was a huge, unprecedented event.
Yeah, but in the preparation for any fight, I wouldn't be thinking about the event. I'd be thinking about the fight, because you got to keep reminding yourself that you're supposed to be the calm for the storm. You got a minute there to get somebody's breathing calmed down, to clean them up, and give them one or two things to be aware of and one or two things to look for. You don't, like Freddie used to say, direction is better than hype. You don't have long. So I don't think that I could be ready to work like that if I was being delighted by the event. And then I suppose I would look back and now enjoy the event if we had got what we wanted from it. So, with Eamon at Madison Square Garden, we didn't get the result, but every single part of the journey to get there was so satisfying in how we managed to do it, that we took that from it, and we took that Eamon was able to prove I deserve to be at this level. I didn't win this time, but you don't win every time, but I deserve to be at this level. So there was some satisfaction with that. With George, we all knew he was world class. Everyone did. And it just, I suppose, like I said, I couldn't look back and enjoy it, because we just think, damn, we got 2 times it got away from us. And so we go again.
George's third world title shot of what would eventually be 4 is the one that people tend to forget about, I think, is against Badou Jack, which was quite a messy fight, and a close one, of course. Didn't quite get the decision in the end. And it seemed not too long after you guys went your separate ways. And there was a couple of interviews I remember at the time where it seemed like you were thrown under the bus a little bit. You were used at least partly as an excuse for that defeat. What do you remember of that time?
Well, I remember it definitely. I remember it for lots of reasons. I remember it because my wife was pregnant with our youngest child, and he was born when we were away in training camp. And then he went into intensive care when we were away in training camp. And then, of course, with, how a month before the fight, the father, I call him the father, Barry, that worked the conditioning in the corner. You see him, that looks like a priest. So the father, he comes see me about just 1 or 2 things in the camp, and he goes, "Hey, Paddy, just this, that." And I goes, "Yeah." I says, "Well, listen, it is what it is now. We're in a good place. How's he performing for you? Personal best, no problem. Dan is on his strength, personal best. He's hurt everyone in camp. He was spiteful with everyone in camp. It was in a perfect place." So I said, "Don't say nothing, because if you say anything now, it's not going to change anything." Just about the little point that he was saying to me, I said, "It's not going to change anything now anyway." I said, "So you don't say it, because if anything goes wrong, you've brought something up that you don't need to. That's not going to help." I said, "Let you in on a secret." I said, "Listen, the day after the fight, I won't be here no longer." And he goes, "Well, why?" And I said, "Well, I've got my reasons." I said, "But he's in the perfect place. He's ready to do his job. everyone, you and Dan and me have got personal best out of him. And that's all what it is. So when we didn't win it, of course, you know, we didn't. It was different than if he had won it and we'd have been sat down and I'd have talked and I said, listen, here we are. He didn't win it. He reacted the way he did. So when I got back to the UK, I texted him and says, listen, we won't be working together no more. We've given it our shot, and that was it. And then he went on to say the things he went on to say, which is, you know, from a psychological point of view, I completely understand, because he's an extremely determined individual. And I think great fighters, it comes down to a mentality. You see lots of very good fighters who have excellent attributes, but they might not be able to hold it together at the right time. They don't have that mental and emotional conditioning to be able to hold it together. But George very much did so. George is somebody that when the crap's about to go down, there's no better man. When the pressure's on, there's no better man. So we had now fought for a world title 3 times. If he did not blame somebody, I don't think he would have been able to continue, because then he would have had to take ownership. So the first one was Howard. The second one was the punch from the gods, and the third one was me. And that's not a joke on him in any way whatsoever. That's, I think, if you look it up, you will see a psychological way that has to be taken on board to be able to then have full belief that I can go again a 4th time, and this time it's all on me, because the last time it was those 2 dudes and the punch from the gods. Now it's my turn. And like I said, he finished the race, didn't he? He won.
He did.
So you can't be mad at it. So he's a perfect example of the attitude that's needed to be successful. The other things that were said, you know, that didn't need to happen, but it is what it is.
And can I ask, why had you made the decision not to work with George any longer, even before the defeat to Badou Jack?
There had just been one or two or three little red flags that popped up over the space of a year, you know. And so I just thought, well, things have changed. And it wasn't the enjoyment for me that it would have been, because of those little changes. And when I say the enjoyment, it's I'll go to the wall for somebody if I'm with them, and that's kind of enjoyable. Having to, you know, you against the world. There's a certain buzz to it, isn't there? So when you feel things change a bit, and then you think, well, it's not us against the world no more. It's not that. There can be just slight little things, and then they build up, and certain things will happen. You think, okay, I'll put that in the bank, and I'll remember that. And then I just thought, okay. So I had made my mind up then in the last month, when, you know, something happened, and that was enough for me to be like, okay, I know where we are. But we still, hey, listen, it was still complete and utter belief George was going to do it. He was more physically and technically prepared than he was for any of the fights that we were together. But he did not, at that time, rate Badou Jack, who I think has gone on to prove what a good quality of fighter that he is. You know, he's very, very much like an Andre Ward, a Floyd Mayweather when it comes to, he's got beautiful balance. He understands distance. He feints well. He's got a good jab. He doesn't necessarily be physically strong himself, but he's able to negate strength inside by his balance and stance. So he's very much, you don't see a lot sometimes because he's doing it so effortlessly. And I always thought that was going to be a very hard fight going in, but I thought George does everything as far as the boxing, just that little bit better. He does have a better jab. He does have sharper feet. He is that bit quicker. We didn't know how good a puncher Badou was, but regardless, we definitely knew George was a puncher, a world class with his right hand. And the strength side of it, you know, it wasn't a fight where I wanted us to be inside using strength against a man who can make you fatigue just by his balance and his poise when he's inside. So why waste your energy? So George was ready to beat him, but I don't think George, well, I know George didn't have him up on a very high level. So I think knowing that he had prepared technically and physically so well, that would even make you slightly more relaxed mentally, because you didn't have him on the highest level anyway, and now you know you prepared completely. Well, then the job should even be a fractionally easier. And then when you find yourself on your butt in the first round looking up, there's a mental shock that you've got to adjust to. And, you know, for the most part, George did adjust to it. We had a bad 3 rounds, 7, 8, 9, and it was still a split decision to Floyd's boy in Vegas. So, but it's still a loss, and a loss is a loss.
You've mentioned several times about George finally winning that world title at the 4th attempt, and it seems that it's something that makes you happy. Do you remember watching it and how you felt when he finally got it?
Well, you see, the thing is, if you're a fan of anything, you're the fan of that thing before you're a fan of anyone that does it. Sure. So first of all, you're a fan of. We're involved in boxing 24/7. We're passionate about boxing. Yeah. So when you have the opportunity to observe fighters and then go beyond that, sometimes in your careers, then you work with those fighters that are able to do those things that you admire, well, then you admire that fighter. And I couldn't care about anything else. I tipped all of my 50 hats to him when he won it. It was just, you're in the gym all the time when you're teaching fighters, training with them, you're working with them. You might be wanting them to do something, and it's not just showing them how to do it and telling them when to do it. You might want to bring up a certain fight that's being done repeatedly in and say, listen, if you watch, you know, James Toney against Michael Nunn, or if you watch Castillo against Corrales, or if you watch and you bring up a fight and say in the 5th round, watch how he does such and such. Well, that's a great way for any fighter to be able to go see exactly what they need to be doing and how it should be done, and emotionally the way it should be done, not just the technicality of it, the whole thing. Well, George pretty much could take up a few chapters in a book, couldn't he? If you were saying to somebody, this is the mentality required that you need. Here's a world-class jab. Here's how to keep being able to go again, you know. Some people have failed the first time and just couldn't even get going again. Some people have won world titles and couldn't defend it because winning it meant so much to them. But, you know, for George, winning it meant so much that he wasn't going to stop till he get there. You got to admire that, ain't you?
Definitely. And are you guys still in touch now?
We don't go for long walks anymore. We haven't ran down the beach towards each other to slow music quite a while. So no, I haven't spoken to him since then. I did send him a text after he won the world title congratulating him, but I didn't get a Christmas card that year.
Fair enough. What is the situation with you and boxing now? Are you still heavily involved? Who should we be looking out for? Who you're working with in the gym?
Well, I manage and train 10 fighters, and then I train another 2. But this lockdown has served to make everyone think, I think, about stuff that you might have been too busy to spend time focusing on. And I definitely want to go back to spending more time with my youth. I think that things are going to be even harder for them now, psychologically. I know it's hard enough for a lot of the adults now.
Sure.
And we can talk pre-COVID, but definitely since the COVID, I mean, there's just people who would not even. I know that everyone is open to having struggles, but people that you wouldn't expect it at all, and they're suffering bad since it. So you can imagine now being a 12-year-old kid or a 13 or a 14, 15-year-old kid, it could set you back a long way. So I want to spend more time with my youth. So I want to open a school. I want to have a community hub where we can have mental health going on. People can come and just do the fitness. People can come and take their BTECs. Kids can come eventually to full school and do their history and their science and their English, the whole thing here. We'll hire teachers in. But people will be able to come down and do upholstery and do some working with old furniture and teach these youth how to be able to turn a coin, and look after themselves. And so I've let all my fighters know what to say. You can't give 99% to your fighters. You're still the 1% you don't give them could be where you made the mistake. So they're going to be managed and trained by other guys. Some of them are going with Robert Lloyd Taylor. Some of them are still looking for trainers. And I'm going to spend time getting this project up and going. I've got some good people behind me, so it'll be fun. It'll be an enjoyable fight.
Well, we look forward to following it.
Very.
This talk has been absolutely fascinating, I've got to say. And if it's any indication of how engrossing the book is, I look forward to reading it. And that we said at the start that was the initial kind of catalyst for this conversation. Hats, was it hats, hand wraps, and headaches? I had to think about that. Hats, hand wraps, and headaches, which came out last month. Just sounds like an incredible kind of roller coaster journey, but told, I would imagine, in your trademark engaging style. How do people get hold of it? Is it just Amazon and that kind of thing?
Amazon, I think, is where people buy everything, isn't it? From toothpaste to books to everything is on Amazon. So you can get it on there. I think it's on Waterstones. I think W.H. Smiths are going to be stocking it. So if you fancy looking at some pictures or maybe reading a few stories, buy the book, and there might be something in there you enjoy. I think that, I know that Lee that Teach did a fantastic job at giving character to the characters, not just a load of sentences about information about fights or whatever else. He gave it some life and soul, and he wrote it in such a way that you're able to read a chapter and put it down if you want, and then when you pick up the next one, it's a completely different story in itself, so you're not having to go through the whole book in one hit. So hopefully there might be something in there for everyone to enjoy.
You're not a bad storyteller yourself, Paddy, so don't do yourself a disservice. I'm sure Lee's contributions were invaluable, but I'm sure he had a lot to work with as well.
Well, we did it on Guinness and poachine, so it was definitely flowing.
Well, how can it go wrong? What could possibly go wrong? Great stuff. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to catch up with you, and maybe we'll do this again in 6 months or so, see how the school's coming along.
Yes, brother, I appreciate that. That'd be cool.